if you're a parent, you're an entrepreneur, there's a lot going on in your life. And we're going to make all those mistakes. And we really want to have a strong practice of self-compassion, that like permission to be human, giving ourselves that permission to be human, really starting to cultivate a voice inside that's kind, starting to speak to ourselves as we would a dear friend. And the beauty of that is that when you are inevitably human and you make a mistake, when you yell at your kid or you like totally flop something and you forget something in your business, like whatever, you can give yourself that soft landing. And when you do, you're just able to get back up again more easily, right? When you can, you cannot give what you do not have. So if you can practice to love and accept yourself as you are, if you can practice to be kind to yourself as you are, accept your inevitable humanness, and accept that you're going to be good enough. And that's awesome.
All right, Hunter, I am so excited to have you on the podcast today. I'm excited to dive in. Mindful parenting and being really conscious and aware of how we're interacting and engaging and empowering our kids has definitely been something I have been acutely aware of as a parent. And so I'm excited to have that conversation with you today and kind of dive in there about how we can best support our parents and our kids and work together and foster these really amazing relationships. So thanks so much for coming on.
I'm glad to be here, Renee. Thank you.
Yeah. So before we dive in, will you share a little bit about you?
Sure. I'm a mom of 2 girls. I'm an entrepreneur. I used to be a painter. I used to paint, and sometimes still do, images of pregnant nude women with wild predator heads. And apparently the doulas of the internet love my artwork. They like sharing it around. It's really interesting. But
That's a fascinating little niche.
It is a fascinating little niche. Yeah. And I had work in some shows and group shows in New York and things like that. I was doing that. And I think actually that all that work, it helped me, it led to the work I do now with moms and like helping in mindfulness and helping to kind of accept and understand all the different feelings and things that are coming up. But also it helped me as an entrepreneur in an interesting way in that in the art world, it's like, you just like, there's so much rejection, you just like, you put a proposal out there for a show or whatever you submit to a group show. And there's just, it's like 90% rejection. And, occasionally you get these yeses, and in comparison, it was so much easier to like make things happen in the business world that I was like, I felt like that experience of having to deal with like massive rejection made me very resilient to the whole process.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And imagine like all the other ways in which that resilience helps shape all other areas of life, right? And how one of the big things I feel like I want to teach my kids is that idea of resilience. And I was asked in a podcast interview the other day, if you could talk to your younger self, what would you want to teach her or what would you want to tell her? And it was kind of in lines of that, like being confident in yourself and just being okay with who you are. And then that resilience factor and how the more we fall and get back up and the more we fall and get back up and how powerful that is. So what a beautiful lesson. And it is amazing how so many things cross over, right? How one area of our life bleeds in with another and gives us these skills. How have you, even just kind of thinking that, like, how have you seen some of the skills cross over between your entrepreneurial journey with motherhood?
Well, I think that your entrepreneurial journey gives you a lot of self-awareness, right? It like shows you all your issues in the same way that motherhood does.
Yes.
Like, having a small business and also like maybe having like a toddler, right? Like these are 2 things that are like, here are your issues and here's another issue. Like, here's some things you got to work through. And
yes,
and it really makes you I think both processes make you really self-aware and to be able to move ahead and be able to respond sensitively to our kids, to be able to be there for them, but also to be able to have the wherewithal to do the like scary as all heck journey of entrepreneurship. You have to have a lot of grounding and you have to have a lot of self-awareness, and you have to be able to have the bravery to look at what's not so comfortable. And I think that those are some overlapping places for both of those for sure.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like how I remember talking about like motherhood and starting a business were two of the biggest, most scary growth inducing things in my life, and how like when you do both of them, it just becomes this even exponential thing. So I know that in that journey, we can get a lot of emotions and things get really easily triggered. And I know a lot of women that I work with are, as they're trying to juggle multiple different things, those emotions can bubble up and feel like, I don't know what to do with them. I don't know how to control them. I don't know how to respond to my child. And when they feel like they're carrying a really high stress load or they have a really full plate, managing all of that can be overwhelming. And so what are some of those strategies and tips that you have in terms of kind of juggling that feeling of, I want to be a great parent and show up and connect with my kids, but I've got this really full plate and I sometimes feel really like I don't know what's going on inside myself even some days. Like, how do I juggle a little people's emotions and feelings at the same time?
It's a lot. I mean, and I think I just want to acknowledge that, parents don't get enough support. We tend to offer, I don't want to offer an individualistic solution and then you're juggling a million things because you're trying to survive, and you can't do that because you don't have enough support. So a lot of people out there, I just want to acknowledge that we just don't have enough support for parents in our culture, in at least the US society. And I mean, I might have a friend who lives in the Netherlands. It's a whole different world. Like, it's amazing. But yeah, so that's a big factor that we need to acknowledge, that we, at least in the US, could all use a lot more support. So that said, and that acknowledged, I think that with both parenting and entrepreneurship, actually, like, I think that we sometimes, we go into these things, like, at least I did. And I was like the person who is a good student. I could get the good grades. I could do a good job at my job and all these different things. And then you get into the situation of parenthood, and you get into the situation of your own business, and you can't do it all perfectly. Like, done is better than perfect. And with parenting, literally the best we can do is good enough. I mean, good enough parenting, like, that's literally the very best we can do, because we're not going to be able to meet our kids' needs in every single moment. That's just not possible. And if we could, you'd have some real messed up kids if they never had any challenges, or their every single need was met every single moment of their lives. Like, that would be a problem. Anyway, we have to acknowledge, like, we can only do good enough, right? And so if we can say, and this is where mindfulness comes in really beautifully and really helps with both of these things a lot. I know when it's not in your life and it's something that's maybe feels like a to-do that people suggest, it feels like another thing to do. But the weird thing about it is that it helps us to have like a steady mindfulness practice, a regular mindfulness practice helps us to have more time in a strange paradoxical way, because when you're with your kids, you can be with your kids. Yeah. When you're working, you are working, right? Well, let's, like the Buddha said, like, when sitting, just sit, when walking, just walk. And the ability to take your attention and be a little bit more of the master of your attention, and to be able to say, right now I'm with my kids. And right now, maybe for the next, I'm going to even set a timer for 10 minutes. I can, like, put down my phone. I can leave work behind. I can turn it all off. I can have boundaries around my work, even though it feels very much tied to my identity. I can have some boundaries around it, and I can leave it behind. And now I can give my attention to you fully for these 10 minutes. And really, that's what, our kids, that's what they really crave, right? Is like, they want you to be able to see them, to be able to hear them. That's what we all crave from each other. We want to be able to be seen and be heard. And that's the way we show love, is with attention, with time. And it doesn't have to be like 100% of the time. It doesn't have to be like, it's not about gifts. It's not about stuff. It's about just being present. And you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be in like the most perfect mood. But if you can be curious and about who are you right now, and leave everything behind and just do that for a few minutes, like, that's such a gift to another person. And I think that that's the thing I would offer most, that we want to practice for most of, is to be able to just, when we're there, do that. When we're working, do that, right? And be able to have that more focused attention.
Yeah, 100%. I think you tapped into it. What I've kind of described is like, how do we have CEO brain and mom brain and have those two separate things when so many women feel like they're bleeding together? It feels like one can't shut off and they can't be in the other. And even just the last couple of days, I've had a couple of calls with some of my clients and just listening to them, I'm like, you're not going to be able to you're looking at your calendar and your time. It's not that bad, but you can't even focus because your brain is just so in hyperdrive. Like we got to work on the brain and the mind being able to like calm and settle for a minute so you can actually look at your paper and see that it's not that bad. And so I think it is really powerful. So looking at, you brought up this concept of mindfulness, right? And that is a huge key in being able to separate and differentiate between CEO brain and that mom brain and having them both go at the same time. So what are some of those tools and strategies that you've used with your clients and things to help really that process, like be able to say like, this is CEO time and this is mom time?
What you're pointing to, Renee, is so wise, because the truth is that our ability to steady our hearts, our minds, and our nervous system, that comes before everything. Because if we are stressed, you're jumping into that stress response so much faster. And we know that from the research that the fight, flight, or freeze stress response literally cuts off access to the higher order thinking parts of your brain. It like bypasses it, right? You're not then working with a full deck. So before you can do anything, before you can be a good parent, before you can do a good job at anything that you do, you have to be able to have some practices that steady the heart, steady the mind, steady the nervous system, down regulate so that you can access your whole brain, so you can pay attention better, right? So you can have clear thinking, you can have all that stuff. So in mindful parenting, that's the foundation for being able to respond to our kids effectively, right? The same foundation to be able to be responsive and clear in our business is the exact same foundation it takes to be able to respond with clarity and kindness to our kids effectively. So I love to help people, even busy parents, people with little ones and old ones and whatever, actually build a steady mindfulness practice, a meditation practice, a formal practice, and it's great to do lots of different kinds of mindfulness, like mindful walking and dishwashing and things like that. But if you don't just do that for a few minutes every day, you tend to forget all those other little things, right? So it's like I kind of think of it like a brain hack, right? We just start out with maybe 3 minutes, with 5 minutes. I know you got the time. I know you scroll on social media. You got the amount of time to scroll on social media. You got that amount of time for this. And we practice and we sit and we bring our attention back to the present moment. And we practice not reacting to all the like crazy yaya monkey BS of our head. And, and we start to get to know it. We start to get more familiar with it. We start to have a little more compassion for ourselves, but it builds this muscle of non-reactivity. And as we notice our cray and pull it back again, as we notice we're planning, we pull it back again. I'm planning and pull it back. I mean, at least for me as an entrepreneur, like I sit in the morning, it's all like planning. Anyway, you pull it back again and again and again. And each time you do that, it's like going to the gym and like doing a bicep curl. It's like, that's like a yes moment. Like I am bringing my attention back, and it builds a muscle of being able to be the master of your attention, be the master of your brain, be able to increase your impulse control. It also decreases anxiety, decreases depression. This has been shown by like 47 different studies or more. It's like a real serious effect. Yeah. And sleep better, all of those things. And we know that everything goes through our minds, everything. It goes through our minds, goes through our hearts, and it helps us to regulate our emotions, all of these things. And when we can have a regular practice like that, it's kind of like there are other things we can talk about for kind of in the moment, but like when we have a regular practice, right, like that, we're building that muscle, we're building a clarity, we're building an ease, we're building like that down regulation into our lives so that we've got money in the bank when we need to withdraw, like intentionally, you know what I mean? The CEOs are doing it, prisoners are doing it, celebrities are doing it for a reason, because it really makes a huge difference, and it's side effect free. It's free, you know, it's like so many great reasons to practice.
Yeah, so much. Yes. And I know we've talked about in the podcast already some of these ideas about like stress and cortisol and how that impacts all areas of your body, right? But I've really brought in that idea of how it's impacting your cycle and your hormones and, and even talking about like your stress level and cortisol levels for most women is really high. And we don't even realize that it's that high. We just think that that's the norm, right? And then you enter into these, like you're talking about, like having this steady practice and you realize, gosh, I did not have to be functioning that high all the time. Like that stress was so high, and that stress is impacting, like the cortisol levels are impacting that fight or flees response. And then it's also, like you said, cutting off those higher level functions, but it's also impacting your digestion and your metabolism and your ability to sleep and like so many different areas of our bodies. And I think it's such a powerful tool and resource. And yet so many of us have a trouble actually creating and making it a sustainable habit. It's like one of those things where so many times I hear women say, I want to meditate, I want to have this mindful practice. I just can't seem to stick with it. I can't seem to make it consistent. So how do you go about that? Like, what are your tips on, gosh, my life is all over the board. I can't seem to keep consistent with it. I can't seem to integrate it into this steady practice that you're talking about.
It is hard. It really goes against grain, I have to say, because evolutionarily, like we evolved to like move forward, to be on the move, to be on the lookout, like scanning, etc. So it goes against grain to like sit still. I kind of think of it as like kind of a brain hack that they discovered 2600 years ago, but goes against grain. In fact, they did some study. I don't think they called it meditation, which may have made a difference. But there was one study done at a university where they put people alone in a room. They would just either sit there alone in a room for 15 minutes, or the only thing to do in that room was if they wanted to, they could push a button and give themselves a mild electric shock.
Oh.
And something like 80% of people gave themselves shock. It's like so funny to like think about, right? Like it's so against the grain to sit still. But when we do, it's really powerful. So how do we do it? It's different for everybody. I think habit building, it's really helpful to like kind of reward ourselves at first. It's really helpful to know your why, to understand it. Like when people come into mindful parenting, they want to like improve their relationship. They want to like maybe stop yelling at their kids. So that's like a huge motivator because you're just like, this is this precious human being to you. And you want to change this, right? So you have to really think about, why am I doing this? What is so important about it for me? Like for me, I was in these real emotional ups and downs sort of my whole life. I was, just a highly sensitive person. And for me, it literally like transformed that. So I have so much more equanimity. It's amazing. But so we want to know our why. It's good to tack a habit onto another habit. It's good not to do it alone. It's good to like see if you can get an accountability buddy, someone to do it with, be with a group or something like that. That really helps. It's good to do it first thing in the morning, I think, because then nothing else, like you don't have to like expend a lot of willpower doing it and other things don't get in the way so easily. Like by the end of the night, I just want to have a glass of wine. I don't want to do any meditation personally. I know some people who do meditate at the end of the day. I'm like, wow, more priority to you. That's great. All those things. And it's also good to really start small. So it's good to do it in kind of the same time, same place every day. Say you do it, you try to do it right after you brush your teeth. You leave yourself a little note with your why. I want to do this right after I brush my teeth. And so for the first 2 weeks, you like give yourself a reward when you've done it for 6 days. You give yourself another reward when you've done it for 2 weeks, and you give yourself some like good, healthy little rewards. And that's really a good thing to do. People don't want to do that, but it's really a good thing to do because it really does help you build a habit so much better. And then as you start to get into it, it's its own reward. Like you start to notice when you haven't practiced, you're like, oh, wow, I feel foggier. I feel less alive, less awake, so you start to notice when you haven't practiced. But as you're building that habit, those are all the things to do, like to think about really making it something that you can just make it regular. So you don't have to like kind of think about it same time, same place. I like to encourage people to make a little space for it. Like put a little inspirational quote and an image and just make a little sacred space. So that reminds you as well. Those are all great ways to get a practice started.
I love all of those. And it's funny is for a long time ago, there was this one spot in the middle of our backyard that I would go out first thing in the morning and I would take like a pillow or a yoga mat or whatever, and I'd go out there and I'd sit. And then we've been putting in a swimming pool. And so that whole area of my yard has been destroyed for the last year. And in the back of my head, I keep thinking like, I cannot wait to make this like special little space back out here when all of this is done. And so we got all the concrete in, everything's in, the pool's not done, but the concrete's in. And I was like, I need a chair. Like I want a chair to stick way out there so that I can just have this space that I go out to in the morning. And so I've been like searching and searching, like looking for this perfect little meditation chair, so that it's that same idea of like creating this environment that feels really rewarding, that's going to make me want to go sit out there every single morning beyond just the meditation. And so I've been scouring, and I found the chairs that I want are like thousands of dollars. It's not going to happen right now, like a whole chair set. And so
the like most expensive. Anytime I scan, I'm like, that one looks good. It's like $50,000. I'm like, wow.
I know. I was like, well, I'm not gonna be able to do that. And so I found this set of chairs on OfferUp the other day, and for like $100. And so I told my husband, I'm like, can you please just go get these? And I was like, these are gonna be my stale over till I can get my expensive chairs down the road. But I felt like I need that space out there, and doing it on the yoga mat and the chair or the pillow just didn't feel like what I wanted anymore. So I'm excited to have that space now, and to have that be like, this is that space. This is like, I wanted to cultivate an area that's what it was intended for and how it felt over there. So I appreciate that you kind of brought about that. Like that environment makes a really big difference.
It does make a big difference, but also don't let that be like a hang up too, right? Yeah. Like if you're like, I have to create the perfect space before I can do it. No, you don't. Like you can just sit your butt down. You can pause this podcast right now if you want. You can sit your butt down, say, Siri, set a timer for 60 seconds. Yep. And you could just start to like pay attention to your breathing. And then if you do that, like, wow, that's amazing. Like congratulate yourself, celebrate it. So it can be really simple, but it can, yes, I agree. The environment does help, but don't let that be like a tripping point.
For sure. Yes. I was showing actually a client of mine my schedule the other day, and she goes, oh my gosh, you have 3 mindful breaks in your day. I can't even get one. And I was like, well, they're not very long. They're like 5 minutes, but there's 3 of them in there. Like they're stacked in there where I need them. And so I think even that, like the idea, the concept of like, I think meditation and I think the whole idea of mindfulness just feels overwhelming for people. Like you said at the beginning, it feels like this whole big new habit, this whole new big thing that we have to add in. And I'm hoping that through this episode, so many people are listening have realized it doesn't have to be this big thing, but the benefits can be really big, and the benefits are totally worthwhile, even if just taking those small little breaks. So
it's a couple of things I just want to add to that for people who are curious. Some people are often curious about the amount of time you should practice. Like ideally, you always start small and build up, but they've actually done some research on this, and they've found that Dr. Amishi Jha, University of Florida, has been studying this, and they've discovered that 3 to 5 times a week, 15 minutes, a spot, can be really very effective.
Okay.
So that said, but also another great teacher, Tara Brach, she recommends saying to, she says to herself, I'm going to practice every single day. It can be any amount of time, and it can be in any location. And so I think that's also another way to do it, is to say like, I'm just going to practice every single day, and any amount of time, and the idea is that I can sit, and it may just be on put the toilet seat down. I sit on top of that, right? Might just be that. And I set a timer for 60 seconds, or where I just take 10 deep, slow breaths, or maybe I'm doing that 15-minute practice with a guided meditation or something like that. So it can be very flexible. It's just start small, build up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that even going on that, like, it's so unique to each and every one of us, right? Like those mindful breaks is something new that I've put into my schedule, and it goes off and sends me a little buzzer. And it's just that reminder and check of like, stop working and take a little break. Like that's what I needed, but I didn't have those in there, 2-3 months ago. And so and even that, like what you need at certain times might shift and change as life goes on, and things shift and change for you and the state of where you're at, right? Like your journey we talked about at the beginning is that you're always learning and you're always growing, and those needs and things that you're learning and growing require different things from you. And so to be able to accommodate and adjust and change that and have that fluidity and flexibility is really important. So is there anything else you feel like we have left out of today's episode that you want to make sure we share?
I think I just, as we talk about all this, right? Like these are a lot, like I feel like I'm giving you some things to do
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. And I just want to offer, like, if you're a parent, you're an entrepreneur, there's a lot going on in your life. And we're going to make all those mistakes. And we really want to have a strong practice of self-compassion, that like permission to be human, giving ourselves that permission to be human, really starting to cultivate a voice inside that's kind, starting to speak to ourselves as we would a dear friend. And the beauty of that is that when you are inevitably human and you make a mistake, when you yell at your kid or you like totally flop something and you forget something in your business, like whatever, you can give yourself that soft landing. And when you do, you're just able to get back up again more easily, right? When you can, you cannot give what you do not have. So if you can practice to love and accept yourself as you are, if you can practice to be kind to yourself as you are, accept your inevitable humanness, and accept that you're going to be good enough. And that's awesome. Like, then we can give that to our kids too, which is really beautiful, right? Like, we cannot give what we do not have. So start with you, start with offering yourself kindness, start with offering yourself grace. And from there, then you can come to that place of like, well, okay, maybe I can do this meditation practice. Maybe I can do these 3 minutes, not from a place of what's wrong with me. Hunter and Renee said I should be doing this thing and I'm not doing it. And now I'm suck because I'm not doing this thing. Like, come from a place of like, man, there's a lot going on. This is hard, but I accept myself as I am. And from that place, with a little more spaciousness, from a little more grace, then you can start a practice, start to bring some of these healthy things into your life, and they're going to feel really nourishing. But start with some kindness to you.
Yeah, I love that. And I appreciate you adding that in there, because I think it is such a valuable conversation and a valuable thing to note, that we do that self-compassion and the way we talk to ourselves and how we respond to ourselves is the way we radiate to everywhere else in our life and anybody else in our life. And so we do have to start there first. So Hunter, thank you so much for coming on to today's episode. If somebody wants to dive in more with you and learn more about mindfulness and mindful parenting and connect with you, where would be the best place for them to do that?
Well, you can find Raising Good Humans anywhere books are sold. There's an audiobook form too of it. And you can find everything else at mindfulmamamentor.com. The Mindful Mama podcast is anywhere podcasts are listened to. And I look forward to connecting with you. If something resonated, tag me on Instagram at Mindful Mama Mentor.
And with that, I know anytime I have a guest on, and even for myself, like, I love getting feedback from people that are listening. So if you had something today that was super resonating, something that just stood out for you, something that maybe just made that small little bit of a shift for you, I know that Hunter would truly appreciate if you go over and send her a little message on Instagram and let her know, send her a DM and just say thanks, or let her know what it was. And I know it just kind of, it's one of those things we love to hear when we sometimes feel like we're talking to the abyss, but I know there's a person out there. So if you're hearing it and it made that little bit, even just that small shift and small difference, I know she would love to hear that. So thank you so much, Hunter, for hopping on. Yeah.